What is up, guys? Today we're talking about lighting for your display. This is huge. It can make or break your collection room no matter what you collect. The lighting is just such a big deal. It's often the first thing that people kind of get hit with when they walk into your collection room. So I'm going to walk through just a few quick tips today that I found to be really helpful as I've been figuring out my lighting setup over time. Hopefully it helps you guys out. Please feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. And in the comments, I'd love to see your lighting setups and see what you're doing. Okay, let's kick it off and talk about something really basic first. For the most part, there are two main choices when you're buying LEDs. That is LED strip, like the long bars or flexible adhesive versions, or like an LED puck or spotlight. I'm rolling with spotlights in my display cases because I want a more moody vibe. If you're looking to get more light and kind of a broader light source in there, then go with the LED strip. Something that's become really hot recently are the small spotlights where they're only this big. It's like a little can. You can usually put 3 or 4 in a single cubby and really dial in your light. Those are very cool. Mine are the more old school kind of medium sized ones. They can be aimed a bit, but for the most part, they're pretty simple. And then with LED strips, the flexible versions with adhesive can be nice. I always recommend if you're going to install those, don't rely just on the adhesive. Those LED strips get warm and they want to fall off if they're just stuck on there sometimes. My preference would actually be to look for an LED strip with a fixed length, usually in a hard plastic shell. Those tend to install a little bit better, and in the long run, I think their install seems to hold up. The next thing to think about is color temperature. I know there are some guys out there who are doing just awesome multicolor LED setups. My advice is you stay neutral, whether you go like warm white, more of a tungsten color, or whether you go daylight, which is like a bright white. Pumping hard colors at your collection always makes you lose paint detail. And while it can create cool effects, I've seen guys pull it off. It's never something I advocate. My advice, stay neutral on the color temperature, no matter what style of LED you go with. So let's skip ahead here a little bit and talk about something that's almost always overlooked. It's a huge deal. I don't know why we don't talk about it more as collectors. Depending on the type of cabinets you have, whether they're a custom thing you're building into your wall, or whether they're like an Ikea setup like this, or maybe they're all glass, you have to think about the intensity of light you're pumping into your cabinets. If you have an all white shelf, and you put a honking big LED strip in there, that thing is going to be bright. And you start putting LED strips in every single cubby, and pretty soon you have a wall of light. And that can be cool. Some collectors want that big, bright, at you look. But most of us have our collection in an office or in a man cave or in a home theater. And that super bright display becomes really, really uncomfortable to look at and deal with in that space. So please don't make the mistake of buying a ton of LED strips for your glass or light colored cabinets and then be surprised by how it's like, wow, this is just too damn bright. I like my displays really moody, so it's spotlight plus a dark cabinet. It creates a certain effect. You don't have to go as dark as I do. This is a pretty moody look, but definitely think critically about going for that really bright look. It's too much for a lot of people and too much for a lot of rooms. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is placement of the lights. And to simplify things and keep this fast, I'm going to start off with just a global warning. Global warming? Global warning. Warning. I see a lot of guys, I see you out there sticking your LED strip on the bottom of your shelf, lighting your characters or props, statues, whatever, from the bottom. That creates a cool lighting effect on whatever's in there, and it simultaneously blinds whoever the hell is looking at it. No one wants to walk into a display where they can see light sources, especially a bright LED source. It's just a very uncomfortable thing to have that light pegging you in the eye. So my advice is to always light from the top to down. That's going to help limit some of that. I have seen guys pull off setups in DTOF shelving specifically where they light from the side, but even that can get a little uncomfortable depending. My advice is to light from the top down, and in doing so, you also have to think about how deep you're setting that light. Whether it's a LED strip or a spotlight like this, you need to think about how far front to back you're putting that light. If you push the light more further into the cubby, it's going to create kind of a silhouette backlit effect. If you bring it forward, you're going to see light start to wrap over the face of whatever you have in there. And I think the best way to handle figuring out your lighting position placement thing is to get, you've picked your LEDs, they show up, plug those babies in, put some stuff in your cabinet and hold them up to try to see where you want those lights to be. Just take a second and play with it. That little bit of screwing around is gonna save you a lot of work, because God forbid you get them installed and then wanna move them later. It's a pain in the butt. It's a pain in the butt. You don't wanna have to redo your work. Hold them up and see where you want those things. It's very possible that you may have a general kind of placement thing figured out, but like for me, because I went with spotlights, I had to make some little tweaks depending on what was in the cabinet and how big it was and how close it came to the glass. You got to think those things through, and you want to experiment before you just start randomly installing things because you think it might work. Okay, the last tip that I'm going to throw out there is about wiring. There are two parts to this. One, keep your freaking wires neat. We're going to talk about what that means. And two, run your display cases on timers. It's going to totally simplify your life. There's no screwing around with remotes. If you're using LED, they hardly draw any power anyway. Put the whole thing on timers. You can even wire the wiring for your statues into that so everything comes on together, no screwing around. I know I have a bunch of battery adapter, like AA and AAA and 9-volt to AC adapters. That way everything can be plugged in. There are no batteries inside of any of my props or anything, but it all comes on together. Very handy. If you have a cubby that's above like chest height, you need to make sure the wires you run to it, my advice is that you paint those wires into the color of the cabinet. For mine, I just did like a simple black latex to kind of help blend those wires in. In the past, I'd use like wire loom or some other things. However you run the wiring in there, you're gonna wanna make sure you don't have a wire sticking out and looking bright inside of your cabinet. This stuff never seems that messy when you start wiring it. It never seems like it's gonna be too much. And then once you get all these things in here, you get on the back of that cabinet, it can become a total rat nest. So however you run your wires, keep them tight. I don't care if they're just tacked down, or maybe it's a Velcro thing, or maybe you run a full channel to kind of position your wires to one side or the other. Find a way to keep the wiring in the back of your cabinet tidy, because if you don't, over time, as you're adding light sources, it can become a real mess back there, and every time you pull that cabinet out, it's going to be messy and annoying to deal with. So guys, those are my quick tips on lighting your display setup. Lord knows I've installed a lot of LEDs in this place. Hopefully it helps you guys skip a couple annoying chapters of trying to figure out what to do at the beginning while you're getting your lighting choices figured out. Whatever you go with, whether it's a really bright LED strip setup or a more moody, dark spotlight setup, think it through, take the time to make sure the decision is right for you. That's it for today, guys. Feel free to subscribe. I'd love to keep making content like this, so check back soon and let me know in the comments what you're doing with your particular display setup and your lighting. I would love to see it. Yeah, that's it.